The things you think about determine the quality of your mind.
En gelukkig hoef ik er nog maar eentje te maken, dan ben ik er zelf ook wel weer klaar mee. Dan heb ik jullie weer genoeg geattendeerd op alles wat je hier achter mij ziet. Kijk, als het nieuws er nou niet bol van stond, als je nou niet elke pagina ergens openslaat, of elk nieuwsbericht hoort of leest, of hier op TikTok, of op Instagram, of op Facebook. De hele wereld heeft het erover. En dan denken jullie dat die trollen hier op TikTok ons nog gaan vertellen dat het allemaal bullshit is.
This was one of the biggest volcanic explosions in history.
Daybreak and Mount Pinatubo burst angrily into life again.
It happened on June 15th, 1991, in the northwest of the Philippines. It was so powerful, it produced a gas cloud that reached the stratosphere. The explosion caused a lot of damage locally, but the cloud itself did something extraordinary. It lowered the Earth's temperature for 4 years. Sulfur dioxide in the cloud created particles which spread around the Earth. These then reflected some of the sun's rays into space. Scientists are looking to mimic the effects of this phenomenon to counter global warming. It's a highly controversial concept known as solar geoengineering.
Can the weather be manipulated to fight climate change? The European Commission wants to have this debate at the highest international level as it looks at the risks of so-called climate engineering, a contested technology still under development that could help to cool the planet.
We note that geoengineering is discussed and explored in several parts of the world and that it is considered by some as a potential future response to climate change. This is an issue with global implications and considerable risks. Nobody should be conducting experiments alone with our shared planet.
But what exactly is climate engineering, also known as geoengineering, and how can it manipulate the weather? Researchers are already working on several types of technologies that they think could lower temperatures. One is called stratospheric aerosol injection. That means airplanes releasing tiny particles that reflect light back. But according to some experts, hundreds or even thousands of specialized planes working for years would be needed. And then there's marine cloud brightening, an attempt to increase the reflectivity of low clouds with the help of aerosol particles released from boats. There are doubts, though. An important part of the scientific community is critical of these technologies. 400 scientists have sent an open letter expressing their concerns, and among them Frank Bierman, an expert in global governance at Utrecht University.
And these uncertainties cannot go away by research, because in the end, the final impact of these technologies, you will only know when you try it out at planetary scale. You can't really get rid of all the uncertainties by experiments in the lab. And also small-scale outdoor experiments cannot really tell you the full story. They cannot tell you really what are the risks that are that might reveal themselves only when you deploy these technologies at planetary scale over many, many years. Social scientists are really concerned about the geopolitical risk. What happens if some countries do it alone?
A group of scientists, largely in the USA, are advancing these ideas. But the European Commission believes the topic should be discussed at the highest international level to decide if and which kind of regulation is needed.
Climate change is probably the biggest problem humanity faces today. In the past 25 years, the global average temperature has risen by around 0.5 degrees Celsius.
The accumulation of carbon in the atmosphere is warming the Earth up, making more intense hurricanes, rains, higher temperatures.
So far, governments have focused on policies for cutting emissions, but they keep rising. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has risen 15% since 1994. The Paris Agreement, signed by 175 parties in 2016, was a sign that countries were willing to work together to cut emissions. But not every world leader is on board.
The Paris Climate Accord is simply the latest example of Washington entering into an agreement that disadvantages the United States.
If emissions aren't reduced, what next?
Theoretically, solar geoengineering could cool the entire planet. It's actually potentially incredibly simple because all you need to do is inject a bunch of particles into the stratosphere, and there's a number of ways you could do that. Recently, a study out of Yale and Harvard looked at the details of how this would be done.
In that Harvard and Yale study, they imagined building a fleet of planes, up to 95 of them, that would make 60,000 flights a year. The fleet would spread hundreds of thousands of tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere every year. After 15 years, they reckon the world would cool by 0.3 degrees Celsius. But there are reasons not to do this. One of the biggest concerns is that it could make governments complacent.
The big worry is that it will be exploited to argue against emissions cuts.
Senaat Florida neemt wet aan die chemtrails verbiedt. De Senaat van de Amerikaanse staat Florida heeft een wet aangenomen die het spuiten van chemicaliën in de atmosfeer om het weer te manipuleren verbiedt.
But of course, if we don't do it, there's deep uncertainty about how much climate change we get for a given amount of CO2 in the air. Both of those are risky, both are uncertain. The question is, which has higher risk?
The politics of solar geoengineering are so complex that it might never happen. That said, as the world continues to warm, the case for exploring radical measures grows stronger.
Dan heb ik jullie weer genoeg geattendeerd op alles wat je hier achter mij ziet. Kijk, als het nieuws er nou niet bol van stond, als je nou niet elke pagina ergens openslaat, of elk nieuwsbericht hoort of leest, of hier op TikTok, of op Instagram, of op Facebook. De hele wereld heeft het erover.